BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
From BBC Radio 4, this is Things Fell Apart, Season 2. In the weeks before George Floyd's murder, just days into lockdown, a culture war was starting to simmer about the pandemic itself, whether COVID was a deadly threat or a plot by governments to control us and our bodies. This story is about a moment that suddenly took this debate to tens of millions of people.
I think it was in early May 2020, and a colleague sent me a link to this video, and I remember thinking, oh no, why is she getting involved in this? You have to assume that some people died as a result of it.
But the story begins with a chance encounter between a bartender and a customer at a yacht club in Ventura, California in 2006. The bartender's name was Judy Mikovits. She'd worked for over 20 years as a staff scientist at the National Cancer Institute in Maryland, where she earned a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology. Although Judy wasn't widely known in the scientific community, she had authored 40 papers. But when she met her husband-to-be, David, she gave it all up and moved to California. So you moved for love?
Yes, so I moved for love. My David was a big teddy bear. He just lived pure love. You couldn't make that man unhappy.
So one thing that you did was you started spending quite a lot of time at the local yacht club.
Pierpont Bay Yacht Club. And yeah, we joined the yacht club. My David's like, no, I don't want anything to do with a yacht club. And I'm like, no, honey, it's not like that. They don't wear ties. They're not stuffy. They're like us. So we were just the friendliest little sailing club. Since it's a volunteer yacht club, everybody volunteered to do something. I'm a chemist, so obviously I can make a drink.
So were you like Tom Cruise in Cocktail, like with cocktail shakers doing fancy things?
Absolutely. We were called the Martuni Sisters. Me, my friend Robin and Martha. We just had a blast.
Given Judy's background and expertise in science, while she tended bar, she chatted to the customers about viruses a lot. And given her credentials, people listened.
Oh, yes. I absolutely talked about not just viruses, but curing cancer, curing AIDS. Yeah, everybody knew who I was.
And something happened one day at the yacht club. You were making drinks and a couple of people came in. And this chance encounter, just this chance conversation, really changed your life.
Ah, yes.
At the yacht club, Judy had got chatting to an accountant for a very rich woman with a very sick daughter. The woman was friends with another very wealthy couple who also had a very sick daughter.
They had a similar age daughter who was bedridden, very, very ill. Simply two very wealthy women with a passion to heal their children.
The wealthy couple were called Annette and Harvey Whittemore. Harvey was a lawyer for Nevada's gaming industry, and their daughter was sick with chronic fatigue syndrome, or CFS. They were feeling fobbed off by the medical establishment, who were labelling the condition yuppie flu. But Annette Whittemore was convinced that what her daughter had was an infection. Judy had never heard of chronic fatigue syndrome, but she had a passion for science and 20 years' experience at the National Cancer Institute, where she'd worked on treatments for HIV, and so she agreed to meet the Whittemores. She flew to Reno, and they became friends. In those early days, when you first met the Whittemores, what were they like as people, and what was their lifestyle like?
They were very, very kind Christians, but lavish spending like we've never seen. It was embarrassing at times. They would fly me to a basketball game because they knew I loved sports. We felt blessed. We felt at home. We felt like family. All I knew is that their child was sick, and it didn't matter how much money you had. They would have given it all to get their child well. This poor child was so sick, you couldn't brush your teeth and take a shower on the same day. It's just too much energy.
One day in 2006, Judy was at a golf course that the Whittemores owned when Annette turned to her husband.
And she basically said, Harvey, you can't let her leave. Find a way to keep her here. So Harvey said, well, what do you want?
Which is how Judy went from being a volunteer bartender to the research director of a new medical institute, very well funded by the Whittemores and tasked with finding a cure for chronic fatigue syndrome.
Back in 2006, I was a college student and looking for work for the summer. I found a job listing on Craigslist.
This is Byron Shue. The job listing was for an intern position working under Judy at Nevada's brand new Whittemore-Peterson Institute.
She was trying to find a research direction with chronic fatigue syndrome. We didn't have a clear idea of what was causing the disease, and a lot of the time it was just spent brainstorming, just bouncing off ideas. It wasn't very structured.
Still, Byron liked Judy and her husband David, and he has good memories of them all sitting around a fire pit at the Whittemores' lavish home on the banks of Lake Tahoe.
I remember that David talked about Judy very fondly. David said that Judy is a great mentor. She seemed to be very knowledgeable, very affable and talkative.
The Institute had only been going for 3 years when, in 2009, Judy had a breakthrough. She discovered something totally unexpected in the blood samples of the chronic fatigue syndrome, or CFS, patients that they had been studying, something no one had ever noticed before. It was so extraordinary that the journal Science agreed to publish her findings.
It published October 8th, 2009, and it really was the shot heard around the world.
I first heard of Judy Mikovits in 2009 when she and her colleagues published that paper in Science that linked a very little known virus called XMRV to this condition, chronic fatigue syndrome.
And XMRV is a mouse virus, right?
Yes, it's a very little known mouse-related virus.
This is Martin Enserink. He's the deputy news editor at Science, specialising in infectious diseases.
So what they found was that about 2/3 of the CFS patients that they looked at had XMRV in their blood. And among a group of healthy controls, that was just around 3%.
That's 3% of the public asymptomatically carrying around, passing around an infectious disease.
So even though they didn't say XMRV caused chronic fatigue syndrome, it certainly looked like a very solid link.
And this was like a major breakthrough moment for people with chronic fatigue syndrome, right? Because this was a disease that people really didn't understand.
That's right. It's always been a baffling disease to scientists. It's very severe, it's debilitating, it can ruin people's lives, and it's quite common. And yet we don't know what causes it. So finding that it might be caused by a virus, might be an infectious disease, really, that was a big deal, yes. It would be huge for patients because if they had a virus, you could start thinking about treatments. So very early on, people began seeing her almost as a savior.
Harvey would introduce me as saving his daughter's life. We were just heroes in Nevada.
So how big a deal is it to get a paper published in Science?
Getting published in Science can feel like hitting the jackpot. It's a big deal.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the program today, a life-changing discovery from the Whittemore-Peterson Institute. You will be astounded. On the program today, Annette Whittemore and Judy Mikovits.
I saw an interview that you did around the same time that the Science paper was published. It was you and Annette, and the two of you looked so excited. Your eyes were shining.
Well, of course, it's what you worked since you were 10 years old.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we are thrilled to welcome to the program Annette Whittemore. She's the president and founder of the Whittemore-Peterson Institute. I can't think of a more exciting program I've done because what we're about to talk about is world-shattering news.
I was absolutely thrilled. This is exactly what we started out to do. The exciting thing is that Judy can tell you how the virus works, and every one of the symptoms makes sense because of that. So
yeah, we were excited. We were happy because we knew we could heal people who had been sick a long time. That was my entire life work, and I could pass on the knowledge and retire at 55 as I'd planned to do with my husband the day we got married. So yeah, we were excited.
What has been the result of the medical community?
It's been phenomenal. The scientific community has just been over the top. So.
Yeah, we've presented these data 3 times, and you could hear a pin drop in the audience. It's amazement. The scientists are excited. Everyone's working on it. It's an entire new field of medicine.
How did she fit into the scientific community, Judy and the Institute? Were they seen as like outliers?
I think it's fair to say that very few people in the biomedical community had ever heard of Judy Mikovits. Her scientific career had not been very remarkable, and the same is true for the Whittemore-Peterson Institute. I had never heard of it. I think almost nobody had. It was a new institute out in Nevada. I mean, here these people who are not scientists launch a new institute, and boom, within 2 or 3 years they have a major finding that looks like it can change everything.
One reason why Judy was being taken seriously was because her paper had 13 authors. 5 were from the Whittemore-Peterson Institute, but others were from the National Cancer Institute and the Cleveland Clinic.
So it was not just Judy, it was a whole group of people, even though she spearheaded the whole effort. And I think to many scientists that gave the paper more credibility.
But amid the celebration, something a little odd was going on. Take the morning after Science published Judy's paper. The BBC's Nikki Campbell and Sheila Fogarty interviewed her and one of her researchers on 5 Live. And when you listen, it all seems quite normal.
This affects about 250,000 people in Britain, and for decades it has defied a rational medical explanation. So recognition is one thing, and finding the cause is another, if indeed that is what you have done. What about finding a cure?
Finding a cure is, of course, at the forefront of our mind. We're looking for treatment and hopefully relieve the symptoms of ME and CFS.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you. It's 7:59.
And here's John with the weather.
But Judy later wrote in her memoir, Plague, that the presenters mocked and patronised them, and to retaliate they started talking in a faux British accent like a chiding nanny, and when the BBC realised that they were being laughed at, they hastily cut away to the weather. But as you just heard, that didn't happen. It was strange. And Byron said he had noticed something else, small but still a little strange, about Judy.
I remember one time I was driving Judy, probably an over 1 hour drive, and the whole time she was talking nonstop. I don't recall her ever stopping speaking.
Now, I don't want to malign people who never stop talking, but that's a little self-involved.
Yes, I would say it's a person who talks endlessly for hours does have a little bit of narcissistic tendencies.
So the paper is published in Science. Then what happened?
Very soon, people started trying to replicate this finding. So they took another population of CFS patients and they started looking for the same virus. And they all came up empty-handed.
And people trying to replicate her findings, were those like big operations?
Yes, it was multiple millions of dollars. The scary part was that if Judy was right, XMRV was also in 3% of healthy people, which meant across the United States, about 10 million people walking around with this virus. The US government decided to spend a lot of money on these studies because if XMRV was spreading in the community, everybody agreed that they needed to get to the bottom of this.
But everyone came up empty-handed. Nobody could replicate Judy's findings.
It became an avalanche, one study after another.
So what did Judy say about that?
Well, Judy stuck to her guns. After every paper, She said, well, they didn't quite do it the right way, or they didn't use the exact same techniques that we did. And that increasingly started annoying other scientists. They felt she was moving the goalposts.
It wasn't that they couldn't reproduce our findings, it's that they wouldn't reproduce our findings. Never once did they try to do our work the way it was done in the paper. When you replicate a study, you do exactly what they did. They didn't want to know.
Martin met Judy around this time at a 2011 virology conference in Belgium.
There was a reception with Belgian beers and some cheese, and I caught up with her. And at that time, the paper was already beginning to fall apart. And Judy was very angry about it. She felt under siege, and she said, "We will show that we are right." That was also the first time I heard her express the idea that there might be some sort of a conspiracy going on.
What did she say?
She suspected that maybe the US government had decided to suppress the whole thing. I think her reasoning was that the government just couldn't afford to have a big public health crisis exposed. I couldn't entirely follow her reasoning, to be honest, but that was her thinking.
Some of the scientists who couldn't replicate Judy's findings were developing a theory. Labs all over the world routinely acquire for their experiments lab-grown cells called cell lines. Maybe the XMRV had contaminated the cell lines that Judy was using in her lab.
So the virus infected these cell lines, and so many labs had XMRV sort of floating around in their research materials. But it's questionable whether it ever infected a single human being.
So there's no suggestion of foul play here. This seems to have been like a genuine mistake.
I think so. I don't think it was foul play, no.
The lab owners, the Whittemores, were growing very worried that nobody could stand up Judy's findings. Their relationship was deteriorating. They argued over a cell line that Annette wanted Judy to hand over to a former colleague.
Annette Whittemore calls me. I'm standing in shorts and a t-shirt, and she said, "I understand you have the cell line." And I said, "I have the cell line, but he's not getting it."
Judy wasn't quite clear with me why she was refusing to hand over the cell line, but I got the sense that by then she had grown mistrustful of anyone who might doubt her findings.
And she got desperate, and she's screaming. I said, "No, he's not getting the cell line. Yes, it's in the freezer. Yes, I know where it is. Yes, you don't get it. You know, blah, blah, blah." She said, "I'm tired of your insubordination. You're fired. I'm firing you for your insolence and insubordination."
After Judy was fired, things moved fast. She wanted her research notebooks back from the lab. She says because she was worried that they would be tampered with. But now that she'd been fired, they were out of reach, until she got a call from her researcher, Max.
Max is a resourceful young man, and he got into the lab. It's about 1 a.m. I said, "Max, you've got to protect that data. You've got to secure that data." So he took the notebooks and he took them somewhere, home or his mother's house.
When the Whittemores discovered that the notebooks were gone, they filed a civil lawsuit against Judy for breach of contract. A few days later, Reno police issued an arrest warrant against Judy, listing 2 felony charges: possession of stolen property and unlawful taking of data. This must have been a very crushing time for you.
Well, sure. It was very frightening. We called my friend Robin, who had a boat in the harbor, and I said, "Robin, is your boat unlocked?" And she said, "Yeah, Judy, it always is." And I said, "Okay, can I stay on it for a few days?"
So now Judy was on the run, hiding out on a boat. And so the police added a new charge. Judy was now a fugitive from justice.
It was terrifying, the clanging of the riggings. I didn't know who was going to come down there. Yeah, this was the most terrifying time of my life. That was the worst week. And for 3 days, Science, the journal, was on the phone saying, "Retract, retract, retract." And I said no.
Usually Science only retracts a paper once all the authors agree that it should be. By the time that Judy was hiding out on the boat, most of her co-authors had agreed, but not Judy. Still, Science went ahead anyway. They retracted.
It's definitely not the first time that a paper gets retracted. It happens to some of the most famous scientists. It's not the end of the world. It may be a little painful or embarrassing, but it's also the way science works. People get over it and they move on. And it could have gone that way for Judy's paper as well.
But instead, the opposite happened.
That's right. Everything began to unravel. Her professional and her personal life were in great turmoil.
Judy spent 4 days hiding out on the boat. Then she went home and was arrested.
I was put in the suicide watch wing. They do everything they can to do their little body cavity searches and humiliate you. You have nothing but solid cinder block. You have no blanket. You have no pillow because, of course, you'll commit suicide. I was in a cell with a drug addict who spoke no English, was vomiting and had diarrhea nonstop. So I was essentially in solitary confinement for 5 days.
Spending days in jail as a scientist, it must have been a low point in her career and in her life. It was a terrible thing.
You honestly don't say a thing. It really wasn't until the last day when I was shackled to a lady, hands and feet, in the little bus over to the courthouse. She kind of softened me up a bit and said, "What are you really here for?" And I told her I was a scientist. And she said to the guards, "She stole her own brain."
In Judy's memoir, Plague, she writes about those days, quote, "Anything which kept patients with chronic fatigue syndrome a single day longer in their darkened room, or that put an honest scientist in jail, could only go by a simple name, evil."
I think it must have been an important development in her life that must have shaped her. Also, it's very expensive to defend yourself in court, so I believe she went bankrupt at some point. Everything collapsed around her.
I filed bankruptcy. We lost everything.
Her findings were found to be scientifically invalid. She stole lab data from her former employer. I mean, who would want to hire somebody with such a track record? I believe Judy's ego was shattered by the incidents.
In the end, the charges against Judy were dropped after the Whittemores were themselves embroiled in scandal. Harvey was jailed for 2 years for breaking federal campaign contribution laws, and after that, Judy drifted from view. But unbeknownst to the medical community, she was brooding. Between the unreplicatable paper, the scandal over the retraction, but mostly the unnecessarily cruel arrest and jailing, you can see how she felt that the world had turned against her. I think if Judy was narcissistically inclined, these were wounds that wouldn't heal. She was turning, looking for a new community. Cut to 8 years later, and suddenly Judy is everywhere. She's viral.
Yes, she went viral. I think it was in early May 2020, and a colleague sent me a link to this video, Plandemic. And I remember thinking, oh no.
Dr. Judy Mikovits has been called one of the most accomplished scientists of her generation. At the height of her career, Dr. Mikovits published a blockbuster article in the journal Science. The controversial article sent shockwaves through the scientific community as it revealed that the common use of animal and human fetal tissues were unleashing devastating plagues of chronic diseases. For exposing their deadly secrets, the minions of Big Pharma waged war on Dr. Mikovits, destroying her good name, career, and personal life. Now, as the fate of nations hang in the balance, Dr. Mikovits is naming names of those behind the plague of corruption that places all human life in danger.
This is filmmaker Mickey Willis interviewing Judy for his documentary Plandemic, The Hidden Agenda Behind COVID-19, released on May the 4th, 2020. For tens of millions of viewers, Plandemic was the first thing to challenge the narrative about COVID and lockdown, the first major viral moment of somebody saying, what you're living through isn't what you think. In the film, Judy presents herself as a martyred truth-teller, jailed by a corrupt medical establishment that was now turning its evil on us all.
So you made a discovery that conflicted with the agreed-upon narrative.
Correct.
And for that, they did everything in their powers to destroy your life.
Correct.
You were arrested?
Correct.
And so what did they charge you with?
Nothing.
But you were in jail.
I was held in jail with no charges. I was called a fugitive from justice.
Apparently, their attempt to silence you has failed.
Pandemic just has so much disinformation on an epic scale. She was presented as one of the most eminent scientists in the country. I think her ending up in jail was the result of a terrible employment conflict. Essentially, it really got out of hand in a way that it never should have. But I don't think it was the government's way to silence her.
The timing was impeccable. When the pandemic really became viral in May of 2020, most people had only been under lockdown for maybe a few months. And many people were anxious.
Maybe the most standout, shocking moments in pandemic, the interviewer says, if we activate mandatory vaccines globally...
I imagine these people stand to make hundreds of billions of dollars that own the vaccines.
And they'll kill millions, as they already have with their vaccines.
To say that was extraordinary, because vaccines have saved hundreds of millions of lives.
In Plandemic, Judy not only claims that her shadowy cabal of elites had engineered the virus for profit and power, but that Anthony Fauci, who was in charge of America's COVID response, was responsible for the deaths of millions during the AIDS epidemic.
A new viral video spreading on social media has many public health experts alarmed. They worry the video, which already has more than 8 million views, is manipulative.
Public health experts say it is incredibly dangerous because if people believe what's in this video and act on it, hospitals like these will be overwhelmed with coronavirus patients.
YouTube is deleting it for violating guidelines on COVID misinformation, but that hasn't stopped tens of millions of people from sharing it on other platforms.
Nothing is more insidious than the so-called plandemic conspiracy theory now floating about, which alleges that coronavirus was engineered to increase vaccinations and make people rich.
The game is to prevent the therapies till everyone is infected and push the vaccines. Why would you close the beach? You've got sequences in the soil, in the sand. You've got healing microbes in the ocean, in the salt water. That's insanity.
I think she was right about one thing, closing the beaches probably didn't help much because we now know that that was not a place where many people would have gotten infected with COVID. But to say that if more people had gone to the beach, they would have been healed by microbes in the sand, there's no evidence for that.
Judy released a book too, Plague of Corruption, which ended up on the New York Times bestseller list, selling more than 100,000 copies. She hit the talk show circuit.
Dr. Judy Mikovits, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, ma'am?
Judy Mikovits is somebody that never gives up. They SWAT teamed her and set her up and put her in prison, ladies and gentlemen. But she's been totally vindicated.
Our next speaker woke me up to medical tyranny like you couldn't believe. The movie Plandemic series. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand to your feet and greet Dr. Judy Mikovits.
She's a completely different person now, just trying to have revenge on the scientific community.
These days, Judy's old intern, Byron, works as an application scientist for an oncology company.
When she was discredited, I took off my experience from my resume and tried to forget about her for about 9 years until 2020. I felt a very strong need to combat the misinformation in the Plandemic video. I was briefly on the same panel as Judy, but it was full of anti-vaccine propagandists. But I did my best to stand my ground.
Byron Hasu, if you could put it on the screen, Jamie.
Byron Shu was my student, and he's being paid by the Chinese.
And we're very familiar with disinformation agents. We can smell them.
This is Byron in July 2022, appearing on a live stream show, Southern Truth. The woman shouting is Judy.
You got paid me to take Judy Mikovits out, and you know every word I said is true, and you absolutely do. You're a stupid idiot. You didn't do anything but make a lot of money trying to take me down, and we're coming after you, bitch, with a lawsuit. Gotcha.
So where's the lawsuit, Judy?
Yeah, you're gonna get it.
Then
Wait
show me the
for
lawsuit,
it, honey.
In December 2021, tragedy hit Judy. Her husband David, the man she had moved to California for all those years ago, died. It was widely reported that the cause of death was COVID. So, obviously, when Plandemic came out, there was a very big backlash against it from a lot of very well-respected scientists, including people who had once been your peers. They accuse you of spreading dangerous falsehoods about COVID, and particularly, I think, the safety of the vaccines.
They're not my peers. They're not the honest scientists who never did anything wrong.
Also, some of those people do point out that David wasn't vaccinated.
David didn't die of COVID. David had COPD, the inflammatory disease, long before I met him. He died of a heart attack, and I had no idea until middle of January that they literally called it COVID.
So they put COVID in the death certificate as the cause of his death?
Correct. They murdered him and called it COVID. And that's what the fraudulent death certificate proves. Retaliation against me. And they had to call it COVID in order to destroy my voice forever.
And that's the story of Judy Mikovits. What began with a chance encounter in a yacht club ended with the first great anti-vax conspiracy theory, a new battlefront in the culture wars. It's a story that, I think, touches on a great mystery of our times. What happens to send smart people tumbling down rabbit holes? It's such a mystery that experts in radicalisation say that for people like Judy, ideology can be so mixed up with personal grievance, it can be difficult to know the driving motives. Next time on Things Fell Apart, how a family on a lockdown escaping camping trip found themselves in the midst of this most terrifying culture war.
Unfortunately, as they go further down this very isolated, lonely highway, they start to notice some folks are flipping them off on the road, giving them really hard stares. After that, they start hearing gunshots.
Things Fell Apart was written and presented by me, Jon Ronson, and produced by Sarah Shebier. The music was composed by Phil Channel. The programme was mixed by Giles Aspen. The editor was Philip Sellers, and the commissioning editor was Dan Clark. It's a BBC audio production for BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
From BBC Radio 4, life can be unexpected.
It was big. This was not a wind, this was not a storm, this was a tsunami.
But when confronted with change, humans are remarkably resilient.
I knew in that moment as I fell to the ground that I would recover more.
I'm Dr. Sian Williams, psychologist and presenter of Life Changing, the programme that speaks to people whose worlds have been flipped upside down and transformed in a moment.
If I had to live my life again, would I ever want to go through what I went through? There's a very simple answer to that. I would go through it again.
Subscribe to Life Changing on BBC Sounds.